Today I wanted to do a little experiment, making something like a morning glory bud specifically. I've got a lot of this 1/2-inch square tubing. Looks like it has about a 14 gauge wall, and my intuition tells me that this is probably not going to be any better or easier or economical than using a 1/2-inch square bar, but I wanted to give it a try. So I'm set up here at the vise with a piece of that stock locked in. I made a little tool out of 3/8 square solid, got a fit in there as a twisting aid. We'll see how that works. It'd have the advantage of being non-marring because it's internal, but then I have the trusty adjustable wrench, or could use a regular bending fork or specifically forged bending tool. We're going to do this with torch heat, and I'll start off with the internal tool. Have the torch set up here on a treadle torch arrangement with the gas saver, although most of the work I'm doing lately I don't really use the treadle aspect, just lift it off the shut-off arm manually and basically only use the gas saver part of the apparatus. So I'll heat about 1 inch, then I'm going to give it a quick 90-degree turn. Then I'm going to cool that, because I know that if I try to extend that heat right now, it'll just twist this first section more than I want, even though the other will be hotter. I'm going to put it in a little quench bucket. Of course, that reminds us that anytime you're quenching home stock, be careful not to have that tube pointed at you, because that hot steam is going to come right back at the face. So this heat will work up about 1 inch above, just leading into the first twist. And keep the heat angle down so I don't get up into my handle up here. Try to get an even heat, but that's a little hard with thin wall material. I'll come around 180 degrees. Take the wire brush, clean it up so you can see it a little bit better. Then I'll do the same thing with that. Tool it and take another heat. So far, that little twisting tool seems to be okay. Probably if it had cheater bars, had a little bit longer handle, it'd be even better. I'm going to leave about 1/2 inch of the tube at the top not heated, and then I'm going to try to really speed up the twist in this area, because eventually it'll just kind of twist it right off. So normally you'd be thinking, watch out, you'll twist that off. Well, precisely what I want to do. Heat mostly above the waist, but it's just going to break wherever's thinnest or hottest or weakest, whatever. Fix that there. And we've got kind of a short little bud like so. Still looks fairly nominal coming out of the square tube. So try to do a little bit more forging with that. I found this little taper die. Looks like it was originally set up for the forging press, labeled T1, and I know it's not useful for anything I'm doing right now, so get about a 1 pound hammer, and I'll heat this and see what I can do with forging that into a tapered point a little bit better. Already I'm thinking that probably would have been easier with 1/2 inch square solid. But maybe you'd have a little fence project or grill or something where you needed the 1/2 inch square tube and you wanted to have some sort of finial treatment on it. This might have some sort of usefulness. I'm spinning with the twist as I forge that down to a taper. I tend to tighten the twist up a little bit. Of course, it's going to flatten the edges that were originally rather rounded, but that'll give it more of a forged look. If this were other than an experiment, I'd get that work situation set up where it was at a comfortable level. It's too high for me right now, but it's a learning experience. I want to just hustle through it. Okay, that's about what I want for the taper end of the bud. Now I'm going to bring the forging back down toward the dimensional stock a little bit. So what we can see here is that the forging of the taper still preserves some of the ever narrowing line in the spiral, looking like it's sort of going in that infinite regress. You can see that little bit of detail. It's not super elegant, but sort of nice. On the neck step, what I want to do is I want to fuller this below the beginning of the twist to neck off the base of the bud right just above where the sepal would be. And we'll do that again with torch heat. I'll heat about a 1/2 inch length fairly evenly if possible, and then use a Hardy gate fuller, which I don't use very often. If I were going to do a production piece of work, I'd move quickly to the power hammer for all of that sort of thing. But for this test, we'll be using this old tool. And I'll pick up the size of my hammer a little bit, about a 2.5 pound hammer. And this is what I call a gate handle. It opens and closes, swinging like a gate. Some people still call that a guillotine fuller. To me, the guillotine comes down parallel, straight up and down, and this is a different designation, different mechanism of action. All right, torch heat. Now with most hollow form fullering operations, it's a matter of easy does it. Go slow at first, get the line of collapse well established, then you can speed up as we work further along. You can see I've barely broken the corners at this stage, but I can see it is in the right position. Gives me a little narrower target for my torch heat, and we'll try to get about halfway to finished on the next heat. Okay, I've turned the torch up a little bit. It's just my impression that on the first heat, you really don't need a lot, because the tendency will be to collapse too far too fast. But I'm just trying to work mostly for control. And on the last heat, I get it pretty hot and just close it right up. You see I've got at the heel there a couple of little sharp edges, and I'll just put a little heat on that. We'll put it back in the V-taper swedge block and just knock that down the round a little bit nicer. Alright, wire brush it a little bit. So it has a reasonably pleasing organic form. With a little practice, could probably make it look nicer yet, but this is just to determine feasibility. Again, I still think the better choice might be just starting with the 1/2 inch square solid, if that was a reasonable choice. I finished up the last time I forged and did this little experiment with the Morning Glory buds and put them in the tumbler, took them out, thought they looked promising enough that I might go on a little bit with that. Actually, it occurred to me right after I cut the first one right off at the fuller point that if I cut it off maybe an inch back, then that actually might allow cutting that excess portion and forging it back into something that might resemble a sepal. Be 4 points instead of 5, but that'd be all right. So that's what I'm going to continue with right now and see how that might work. I'm going to try to, I've already taken the zip disc and cut this on the corners and cold, pulled them out. I'm going to try to lock this in the vise and use a little torch heat and a chisel and see if I can carry that line down a little closer to the actual fuller point. Maybe have enough length that I can forge these into little tapers and then fold them up. So there's the chisel we're going to use, there's the hammer. Sure enough, I did gain a little bit of length. All right, I had to go look for a pair of tongs that allow me to get a pretty good grip on this. This is somewhat of an unusual pair of tongs. I got them in a flea market or an old auction a long time ago. Have a nice offset. There's a whole set of them, about 8 different size round stock. Made in a traditional way with the box and the jaw forged in one piece and the reins welded on here with forged welds. And I've really enjoyed using them for a number of years. Alright. Now, I used the little swedge turned around as a temporary stake just to try this out. I'm not going to worry about it cold shut. I don't really care whether it folds up on the top or the bottom. I've switched to a lighter hammer again, like 1 pound. So I don't know if that makes something interesting or not. Something different anyway. Adding a stem. Alright, so that's the finished product. I MIG welded a little stem on there, then I used the same cutting tip that I was using earlier to heat, turned it back to reducing flame where I could sort of melt the weld junction, make it a little bit smoother. And now I'm going to show an alternative for hot waxing for just quick things like a shop specimen. That's probably still 800 degrees or so. And if I spray the Minwax clear satin when that dries, it'll look very similar to hot waxing, and it'll give it enough protection that it can be kept as a shop specimen without getting rusty.